chambers, and multiple things to go wrong. So it, as I was saying, that compressed air goes up a combustion chamber, gets mixed with fuel and spark. As that combustion explodes, and creates that uh, high pressure gas, that all that gas is going to come down here into the turbine side of the turbojet itself, and then out the back. As it comes out the back, that's the thrust that actually moves the aircraft forward. So as that gas comes out, it spins that turbine. That turbine again via this shaft is going to spin the compressor on the front side, and that's what makes it continuous. So as that exhaust comes out, it spins the turbine, which in turn spins the compressor and keeps everything moving. This is his design. This is a cutaway of his design. I like the 3D print because it's easier with all the different colors. But here you can see the axial compressor, the centrifugal compressor, the combustion chambers down here into the turbine and out. And again, the turbine is connected via shaft to the compressor. This was von Ohans's Heinkel HE-178. This was the first flight of a jet-powered aircraft in history, and that took place on 27 August 1939. German Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet-powered fighter, entered operational service in 1944 with an Ohan-influenced axial flow design. As you can see, these jet engines are actually longer instead of wider than the original designs. These designs actually did away with centrifugal compressors and just dealt with multiple stages of axial compressors to compress that air down in order to compress it enough to 40 or 50 to 1. Well, those are modern standards, 40 to 50 to 1, but you get the idea. Horton Ho 229. Some consider the world's first stealth fighter. A few of these were confiscated after the war. It just proves how technologically advanced the Germans were at that time. Here it is, the U.S. Army captured Horton Ho 229, aka the Flying Wing. Here, the Horton Ho 229 aircraft will go on to influence the development of the U.S. B-2 and also the B-21 stealth bombers. You can see the Flying Wing, very similar, using the same design concepts to turbofan jet engines. Well, the German model is actually TurboJet, but B2 and B21 are turbofans. Again, you have turbofan, TurboJet, turboprop, TurboShaft. I've got about 30 seconds here. The turbojet engine, you have the compressor, you have the combustion chamber, you have the turbine, and the exhaust. So you have intake, compression, that high compressed air goes combustion chamber, mixes with oxygen and spark, which in turn spins the turbines to keep the compressor going, and then exits out the back, and then you have your thrust with the exhaust exiting out the back. The turbofan is essentially the same as the turbojet, except it takes a one step beyond. So here you can see for the turbofan design, the interior or the motor that actually spins the turbofan is a turbojet. So this turbojet has multiple turbines in the back. You can see here 1, 2, 3. There's 3 turbines in this turbojet diagram in order to show how things work. So as air comes in, air will enter through that fan and then into the compressor here. This is the first stage of the compressor. This is the intermediate compressor. That air starts to compress down. As you can see here, the space also gets smaller, and you have multiple guide vanes inside this turbojet motor here. So part of the larger turbofan. But anyway, this turbine here actually spins their intermediate compressor, so that air gets compressed down, gets the stage 2 compressor, which is actually your high pressure compressor that is spun by this turbine here. And then as it exits out the back, spins one final turbine, and that's actually considered your power turbine, because that is actually going to the fan, and that fan is what is actually providing the majority of the thrust in a turbofan engine. Unlike before, turbojets themselves, all of that thrust is derived from the exhaust exiting out the back. However, in a turbofan configuration, the fan is actually providing the bulk or the majority of the thrust in a turbofan engine. Basically, the interior or the motor of that fan is a turbojet, and that's what keeps the whole thing going. And then it does provide some additional thrust as the exhaust comes out the back, but primarily, like I said, the bulk of the thrust is derived from the fan itself. Here you can see a turbofan. You can just see how giant these fans are. I'm sure everyone's been on a commercial aircraft. You can see how big those fans are. They might look complicated. When you actually break it down, they're not. They all essentially work the same way, like I was just showing you in the last diagram. But here you can see a mechanic. This right here, you could consider this the turbojet engine that actually spins the turbofan. So as it comes back just from the previous diagram, it goes through a power turbine. That turbine is connected via shaft up to the fan. That fan spins and creates the bulk of the thrust in a turbofan jet engine. Here, obviously, the cowling is off. This is also called a bypass turbojet. Or a bypass turbofan. If the cowling was on, that the majority of that thrust would continue around the sides of the engine, and that is considered the bypass portion. So if you go back here, the cold bypass jet, again, as that fan spins, it pushes all of that air out the back. That's where the majority of the thrust comes from. You can see that here without the cowling on, that air would continue out the back here. And again, you would get some additional thrust from the exhaust of the internal turbojet, but primarily from the turbofan itself. Here is the turboprop again. Internally, it's almost exactly the same as the turbojet and also the turbofan. You can see that you have a compressor, you have your combustion chamber, you have your core turbines in the back, and you also have your intake. So you have your intake, compression, combustion, and exhaust. So what's different between for a turboprop from a turbofan is that turbine spins a shaft, but instead of that shaft powering a turbofan at the front of the engine, it actually goes to a gearbox, and that gearbox is linked to a propeller. And that propeller, again, obviously is providing the majority of your thrust, and sure, you'll get a little bit from the exhaust of the jet engine itself, but primarily it comes from the propeller. So this is a turboprop variant. Again, you have your compressor that takes your airflow mixture or compression ratio from 1 as it enters, just 1 atmosphere, down to 40 or up to 50. So as that enters the combustion chamber, it's 50 to 1 or 40 to 1. You mix that with fuel and spark, and you're going to get one heck of a fire. And that's why turbojets and all turbo engines get so hot, is because that compression is so high, and then you're mixing fuel and spark with that, and then that exhaust gas is what in turn turns everything else. The TurboShaft again works almost exactly the same as the turbofan and turboprop. Instead, in this configuration, that shaft, which is connected to your power turbine, enters into a gearbox. That gearbox then usually goes to a main transmission, and then that main transmission goes up to your main rotor, and then also that main transmission goes to a tail rotor in most helicopter configurations too. So again, the difference between a turbo shaft is that shaft is connected to gearboxes, which is connected to a main transmission, which is connected to your rotor blades and also your tail rotor. But you can see internally, it's the same as all of the others. You have your intake, you have your compression. This compresses air down to whatever compression ratio is specific for that engine. You add in fuel, you add in spark, you have exhaust, and that spins your turbines back here. So this is your turbine here that actually spins your compressor. And then as it exits, you hit your second turbine, and that is considered your power turbine, which turns the shaft, which goes to your main transmissions. It's going to spin the main rotor as well as the tail rotor in most cases. Conclusion. So in conclusion, although because of its limited production during World War II and its infancy as a new technology, it did not greatly influence the outcome of World War II. It would be further refined after the war to become even more efficient and powerful. The jet engine, its multiple variations, is regularly chosen as the engine of choice in many newly designed aircraft today. This technology effectively would replace almost all piston engines in commercial military aircraft to this day. Jet engine technology has changed how the entire world travels through the air, and because of and in the absence of any new breakthrough technology, will continue to be further refined and power aircraft into the foreseeable future. And the following are my references.